Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar on counteracting disengagement with varied learning strategies. My name is Stephanie Klaus, and I'm a project manager at Bowen Learning and a certified public school teacher for grades 4th through 9th in ELAR, social studies, and ESL. And we're really excited to be partnering today with Ivy Stern of IVB Speech and Miss Amanda Bowen of the SciEd Teacher for today's webinar. So thank you, Ivy and Amanda, for being here with us today. We love getting to know all of you, so please go ahead and put in the chat right now where you're from. And if you have any learning strategies that you use to counteract student disengagement, we'd love to hear from you and love to hear from all of our attendees where you're at. What you teach would be great if you could put in for us what you teach or who you teach with. Just one-on-one, or if you're in a classroom. And then we also want to know or let you know that we're recording this webinar. So you'll be able to find the recording on our YouTube channel, and then we're also live streaming it on our Facebook page. So go ahead and head over to the chat box where you can drop your comments throughout the webinar. And if you click on the chat box, you'll find links to our YouTube channel, Facebook page, and also a link to our feedback survey. So this is super important for us because we love to hear and learn from your feedback. So please, if you could fill it out at the end of the webinar, we'd be really grateful. Okay, we also have a Q&A box, and that is for the questions to the panelists, to Ivy and Amanda. So you can put your questions into the Q&A box as opposed to the chat box as a separate entity. And at the end of the webinar, we'll have a live Q&A, so you make sure to stay until the very end for that. You can ask your questions in the Q&A box and request to have them answered live. So let's see, we can look at our chat and then we'll go right into turning it over to Ivy and Amanda to introduce themselves, and I'll let Ivy go ahead and introduce herself first.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ivy. I'm from New Jersey, and I have been a speech language pathologist for over 40 years. I have worked with cradle to grave population. Right now, I'm currently in the middle school, which I absolutely love. And I'm working as part of a child study team. So I collaborate with other professionals and help teachers move forward so that all students can learn.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ivy. And Amanda, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm a mama, I'm a wife, an educator, and of course a resource creator. And you may know me as the SciEd Teacher. So I help science teachers be able to plan, prepare, and facilitate science experiments and activities with ease through digital resources. And I have a little bit over a decade of experience. I learned through my own professional development and research, lots of years through the classroom of just trying different things and seeing what works. I found some great classroom management solutions to create an engaging learning experience for my students. And now I'm excited for us to be able to share this information with you and help you. We want to thank all of you for being here. I saw Norway and India, all over Canada and the United States. So thank you so much for showing up with us today.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And yeah, I saw Manila, we've got Jersey and Ohio, Montreal. That's really cool. It's nice to see everybody from all these different places. So today we're really having a discussion about rising student engagement. We know that that is something that has been occurring for educators in the last few years, and how varied learning strategies can help with that. And so we'll give you some ideas about that and how you can use Boom cards to do that as well. So I'll start with the first question, and we'll go ahead and let Amanda answer this one first. The question is, can you speak to the change in the level of disengagement among students since the pandemic? Have you seen major changes?
Yes, thank you. And I remember coming back into the classroom right after the pandemic. And in my state, we came back in August. And I was teaching second grade. I remember showing up with my mask on and, I'm talking to students and they can't see my mouth as I'm forming different letters. And it really put a barrier. It put a barrier between the students and I. It stunted their phonological growth and it kept it where there was a distance between us. So it was harder to develop those relationships. So yes, I've definitely seen some disengagement from our students, but I don't believe that it's their fault. These students have gone through a traumatic experience with the pandemic, and now it's up to us to find a solution to re-engage them and be able to help weave in a lot more rigor and also have students foster that love of learning that we have as well.
Super, thank you so much. And Ivy, can you answer the same question?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Amanda. It was definitely a struggle. I think in New Jersey, we were out for longer than I feel like anybody else. And even when we came back, some of the kids were allowed to still do virtual. And as a speech language therapist, having the mouths covered, even clear masks, not clear masks, whatever work for different people, it just wasn't the same. You could not cue to your mouth. You could not do any of the things that you instinctively would do as a speech therapist or as a teacher. And so for speech specifically, the students really lost a lot because they're coming back now, let's say in 5th, 6th, or 7th grade for me, and where they would have achieved the sound that they were working on. Now they're still working on it and they're older and they're even more resistant as they get older to working on them. And the kids have been traumatized and they're now having these expectations of what it was before, and it's not the same as it was before. So we have to really, as teachers, which we've learned to do, all of us, to pivot in the way we're instructing our students.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay, and our next question is, what are some ways to infuse creativity and innovation using boom cards into your teaching methods to capture students' attention? Do you want to go ahead and start with that, Ivy? We'll go back to you and then we'll go to Amanda.
Sure. So for specialists like myself, I think Amanda's also the same type of specialist where you're pulling kids out of the classroom. It's great to work in groups because you can have a small group and work with one specific student while the other student's on the boom cards, or you can go into the classroom to infuse a lesson. And some of the kids will say, I don't want to do computers anymore because they're tired of it. So you can put it on a smart board and have them be interactive that way. The smart board is a lifesaver in the classroom for teachers to do interactive with the boom cards. And yeah, you can assign specific sets depending on the to differentiate the instruction, which is really helpful for especially all the different types of populations that I work with. I collaborate with teachers. I do a lot of inclusive therapy to make sure that my students at the middle school are carrying over the skills that they're taught. So I will go in and they'll present a lesson one way, and then I'll present it the same, but they're getting the same practice over and over on the boom cards. So I can really look at what the teacher is working on and create my own boom cards based on that topic.
Super, thank you. And Amanda, can you speak to the, creating a positive and inclusive classroom environment?
Yes. So I love the different ways that Ivy was talking about having things be more interactive. And a lot of times we want our students to be able to do the same activity no matter what level of learning they're at. And we want all of our students to feel included and we want them to feel challenged, but not overwhelmed. So how can we do that? We don't have time to sit here and make all these different assignments, but there are some very simple ways that we can meet students that need a little bit more support with the same exact activity. So one of the things, I'm going to give you some examples in a couple of different subjects. one of the things that I like to do is I like to bring in some more supports. So for example, if we're working on a math problem and I have a student that is beyond the grapple and starting to get frustrated, well, maybe that student needs to work with a couple more of manipulatives, and having those to actually hold and do the math problem with can help that student be able to stay focused on the work and be able to move forward. Because a lot of times when our students are off task, it's not that they're trying to make a poor choice. It's that they're saying this is either too challenging or this is too easy. And so how do we add that? How do we change that? Another way that we can do that is, let's say that you're teaching a science lesson. We can add diagrams. So for example, if you were to be teaching something that, your students were going over the water cycle or the rock cycle, to have a diagram of those actual cycles helps students be able to stay focused when they're working on their boom cards about either the rock cycle or the water cycle. And another example of how you can help students be able to be more excited when they get to the boom cards is to have things that you talk to them about that are real world experiences. For example, if I'm talking about the water cycle, maybe I'm talking about students having a cup outside of lemonade as they're swimming in the pool. And what happens on the outside of the cup? Well, little droplets of water form. And then we can talk about things like condensation. What happens with your bathing suit when you get out of the pool and it starts off wet? But then what happens after a couple of hours of sitting outside is that it can dry. Well, that's evaporation, giving them those real world experiences so that when they go into the boom cards, they're able to really focus, and it makes it so applicable for them. One last example would be history. So how to support our students with history is some of my students, I would give them a map. And that way that they could refer to the map if they needed just a little bit more of support in something like geography. So I hope that helps a little bit. Thank you.
Super. Those are wonderful examples. I actually just saw a teacher teaching the water cycle with the words to a Taylor Swift song. So like, it was really cute. Speaking of like varied strategies. So they were singing the water cycle, the information to the water cycle to a Taylor Swift song. Pretty cute. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so our next question is, how can you use student feedback and boom reports to continually refine and improve your use of varied instructional strategies? So that's really having your student feedback and then using your boom reports to sort of inform your instruction. Ivy, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. Well, one of the things I can tell you about the data that it gives you is it tells you how and when the student used it, for how long, what percentages. So you have hard data on where to pick up your lesson or regroup your lesson if the student hasn't mastered something. You kind of get the whole feedback for that. For speech therapists, it's a great tool, or for special ed students, or even for doing gen ed students for report card writing. It's a great tool for collecting data that you would need for progress reporting, because we all do the progress reporting if we're in special ed. It's a nightmare, but we all do it. But if you have any type of litigation, you have proof that this is what the child was working on, this is the percentage, this is the time spent doing it. And the parent can't say you didn't work with the student on it because it's all there for you. So I suggest anytime you have cases like this, that you print out the data from time to time so that you have it current, because you might need it someday. I know people that have needed it. It's really important, but it also gives you a guide for planning future lessons. All that data, it's really important to know that who your struggling students are, so you can differentiate more with the instruction. The feedback from the students, very important, very important. I can't say enough, because some of the kids learn differently, or they don't want to be on the computers, and you have to really figure it out for them. You can print out boom cards if you need to and use that as your data. I don't know if people know that this is something that's available. You can print it out. One card, if you have a kid with visual issues, you might want one page, one card, or 4 on a card, and you can use that, or use that just after you've done the lesson on the boom cards. Send that home as a practice so the parents can see actual things. Some of my kids who are from lower socioeconomic areas may not, or some of your students may not have access to internet at home. That's really working well. So that's one of the things you can do, is to print it out for them so that they have additional practice. Back over my time. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much for reminding us all of that, is that we can print out boom cards as well. And that leads me perfectly into our next question, although I'm going to let Amanda answer this one as well. So go ahead, Amanda.
Yes, Ivy, and thank you, Stephanie. So you're talking about the printies, and I love the printies just because they allow students to be able to move around as well when you use them as scoot cards. So if you take them and you just place them around the room, around the classroom, in different stations in different areas, which really truly, if you've had classrooms like I have had, okay, and you're thinking, I've got 30 students and now I'm supposed to have 30 stations for students to go through all these task cards that have been printed out, and where am I going to put these 30 stations? Is that I've used students' desks before. So each desk can be a station, and students will have a clipboard, and then they go around and you put one task card, one printed boom task card, or printies as we call them, onto each student's desk. And then they have an answer sheet. And what they can do is you can set a timer. Students can start at one desk, and then they can move. Okay, when the timer goes off, everybody moves one desk to the right, or everybody moves one desk to the left. And then students are still able to get that great rigor that comes with learning from our boom cards, but they're just doing it in a form where they can move around the classroom. And you know as well as I know that sometimes when we're teaching those younger grades, I've taught younger grades and older grades as well, but our younger students get a little restless at the end of the day. So having the ability to take boom cards and just print them off and turn them into a scoot task card game is a great way to get those students up and moving. And then remember, if a student needs some more support, it is that you can just bring those supports with them. Another way to incorporate movement into the classroom is to choose boom cards that have lots of movement on them. So for example, there are boom cards that, like, let's say you need to label a diagram, and you can have it projected on the smartboard like Ivy was talking about, and this can be through whole group instruction, is students can come up and we talked before about the water cycle and the rock cycle, is students could come up and they could move the labels around. Another thing could be done is that maybe it is a geography boom card set and students are labeling Canada. Maybe they're labeling the provinces in Canada, is they can move those labels around at the front of the classroom on the smartboard. So those are some ways that you can actually incorporate some movement and some physical activities into your lessons. And then also those scoot task cards, or printies as we call them, is a fun way to incorporate movement for students that may be a little bit restless.
Super. Thank you so much, Amanda. And so Ivy, can you answer our next question, which is what are some of the ways to incorporate movement and physical activity into lessons when kids are feeling restless? I know you're usually one-on-one, right?
So I'm not one-on-one because I have groups of 5, and then I could do a whole classroom with the teacher I push in. So I could have a lot of kids at one time, but 5 is usually it. But so I'm just like the kids. Most of my colleagues will tell you, I'm like the kids. I can't sit still. I get bored easily. I got to move. So I move. So sometimes we're sitting on the floor. Sometimes we're up. Sometimes we're changing desks. Sometimes we're changing positions. Sometimes we're doing games where we're throwing things into baskets. We're doing different things with the Chromebooks that the kids have. We're moving around. If they get an answer right on the smartboard with the boom cards, we play basketball. So it's all done through movement. Or I'll turn on music and we have to answer questions to the rhythm of the music. We've done that. I have tried different ways. You know, this is not old school anymore. This is new school, and kids need more excitement to remain engaged. I have done therapy sessions or whole class push-in with using different voices. For example, the Count from Sesame Street. I've done whole therapy sessions as the Count from Sesame Street. It gets their attention. I've even changed my level where I'm up on a chair or down or sitting on the floor where they're looking down or looking up. Visual sight is really important. There's so many different things. I've had them do different characters, like they have to talk as, we'll do the whole session as that they're grandparents. They're all talking like older people, and it just gets them engaged to do the lesson. And for speech, it can be a little interesting for them to do it that way, but it gets them motivated and moving. And changing up the way the classroom is set up each time, not like once a month, change up the way your classroom is. Do inside out class, have the students teach, have the students also ask questions that they think other students would want to know the answer to, because not every student will be comfortable asking the question. But there's so many things you can incorporate with the boom cards that people aren't thinking of today. It's not just on the computer, the one little teeny box that they have. They can do it on a board. They can do it on the printing. It's all different things. The kids today need a lot of change.
Yes, they do, don't they? That's really helping them out. Do you notice, Ivy, change in students when you start incorporating different learning strategies in the same lesson?
The kids that were dragging usually wake up. Some kids do get overstimulated, so you have to be mindful of those kids that need more calmness, so there are times when I have the lights off, or I turn on little twinkle lights, or different calm music, or different whatever. If the kids are too overstimulated, I do have headphones for those kids, or study carols for those kids to concentrate. You have to be aware of the different learning styles. And that's a lot, especially if you're in a middle school and you have every 45, 50 minutes, you have new kids coming in. I get that, but you have to really get to know your kids to really see how they're learning, because every kid is different with one of the things I will suggest, and I hope I'm not going over, but is that ask the kids what they need to be successful, because some kids can tell you, this is distracting to me. I need the window shades pulled down, but not all kids know. So give different example for all the kids to share what strategies work for them, because kids may not be aware of the strategies that work for them.
Right, that's a great point. Is sometimes the students aren't aware until you introduce that to them. That's such a really important point. Elizabeth, one of our attendees, did ask inside out school. Can you explain what that is? Inside out
Classroom. So there have been times when I have had a whole classroom where each kid is one kid is sitting facing out their chair, one kid is facing in. So they're looking outward, not even looking into the classroom. They're looking out just to get a different perspective, and it just changes their mindset just for that lesson if they're not paying attention. So they might face a wall or a window when the other kid is facing the other way. It's just pivoting the desks.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I hope that answers your question, Elizabeth. And I was thinking also gallery walks are things too. They get them up and walking around, get them outside, reading things. When I was teaching social studies, we put things up in the hallway to give them some roaming time for those kids who like to get up and walk around.
One other thing is I've had where I have small shelves and the kids can put their laptops on the shelf on different levels. So even if you can get just a small little shelf that's going to be on the wall or on a shelf, just one kid could be up here, one kid could be here. It's just different levels.
That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I like that a lot. That's a great idea. So I wanted to ask Amanda, would you be willing to show us some of the boom cards that you use when you're doing varied instruction?
Oh, absolutely. It would be my pleasure. So one of the things that I've found is that when I'm trying to find out what I'm going to teach the students is I'm going to look for something that, of course, adheres to the standards. That's going to be first and foremost. And then the second thing that I like to do is I like to choose a bundle. So the reason that I like to choose a bundle is I like to choose one that is made by a teacher author that's the same for each deck, so that students can stay engaged longer, because maybe the deck is different from topic to topic, but the author has the same format. And so I'm going to show you a little bit on ways that I get started when I'm looking for boom cards. And hopefully this is a way that you can be able to look as well. So one of the first things I like to do is I like to look for free decks, complimentary decks. As you know, being a teacher in the classroom or being an SLP is that we spend so much of our own money in the classroom. And so it's nice to be able to test out some different teacher authors by starting out with the ones that are free and the decks that are free. And then once I find a teacher that I like, then I'll explore more within those topics. And there's so many amazing creators on Boom Learning that I would really encourage you guys to just dig in and look around. So Stephanie, should I share my screen now if I can talk?
Yeah. Let's make sure you can.
Okay. Let's see here. There we go. Let me click the screen. Okay. So as you can see here, this is just one of my decks, and I am one of many, many authors. Ivy is a author as well. And so if you're looking for SLP resources, make sure to check her out. But starting out with ones, you can look around and you can find ones that are free. Here you see that the price is $0. So that's a great way to just test it out. Another thing that I like to do is I like to be able to preview the deck. So what I do is I go through here with this preview button, and then it says full size preview. By clicking on this, I can see that it tells me the directions here. So that's good. That I like having resources that tell the students the directions, because that's going to help them be able to know what to do. And that means they're going to spend less time asking me questions and more time doing the problems. So for example, if a student was working on this and the student needed more support, what I would do is I would have a conversion chart for that student. And by having a conversion chart, is the student is still doing the problems, the different conversion problems, but the student is being able to have that extra support. And sometimes just having that extra support, that extra chart in front of the student, gives the student the confidence that he or she needs to be able to do the work. And sometimes that's all that's needed. So for example, with one like this, students can go ahead and they can move different words here into the box and hit submit. And then it will let them know, hey, this bottom one, you didn't get anything in, and then these two were not correct. So that's kind of a neat way that you can see what it would be like for the student as they're playing that deck. Let me show you some other things that is also, let's take a different subject for us to do. Let's do something like, let's do the skeletal system. So with the skeletal system, let's say that I wanted to give students, I'm going to click again on the full size preview, and I want to give students more support. Is maybe I'm looking at, this is a more advanced one, of course, but maybe I'm looking at, the students are working on a deck like this. And then a support I would give would be a diagram of the skeletal system, so that a student could look at that, refer to that, and be able to see which bone structure this is going to be that the student needs to select for this. And in this one, this is just a multiple choice, but there's also ones where students can label diagrams. And when things change from card to card, here's one where they would label the diagram, is that it helps students also be able to focus and hold that attention. So that is another way to do that. Let's go into one more. Let's choose one that's going to be history. So I'm just hitting the back one saying, okay, I want to quit. And I'm going back to look at a different deck. So let's do one that's going to be the capitals. So that'll be a great one to work on. So again, it's got some directions here for the students to see. Oh, I'm sorry, this is actually one that's a lesson. So for the lesson, I wouldn't have a support, but that is also something that we can do for students and be able to pull it up on our board. Is Boom Learning. You'll see that there's quite a few authors that have different ones with lessons. So I apologize that I went into one that was a lesson. Let me pull another one. Here we go. We talked about before having wonderful people with us from Canada. So let's pull up this deck here from Canada. And again, you could have a map that actually has the provinces labeled so that students could be able to refer to that. In this one here, it will have provinces, it will have here you can see it's asking a question about the national capital city, and students, again, just having a map in front of them to give them that confidence. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Amanda. We really appreciate visually being able to see that. We did drop both of you, Amanda's and Ivy's Boom stores in the chat box, so please feel free to head over there and check out some of their Boom cards. And I did want to ask you, and Ivy, you can answer this one first. When you're designing your Boom cards, what features do you use to make them more engaging? What features or elements are you looking at to make them engaging for your students?
So I have little rewards when students get them right. They can go to a reward page, which says yay and has all kinds of fun things going on. And I have disappearing, where you click on certain things and find certain hidden things that disappear. So there's a lot more that Boom can do these days to make it more interactive. For speech therapists, you can now record the student's voice practicing making their target sounds, which is a game changer. They can keep practicing and practicing and practicing. I actually recently spoke to some of my students to ask them to create a deck in their minds what it would look like, and then I went in and I created it. They wanted to hear more sounds. They wanted to have it as though we were playing in the classroom to practice at home. So we have moving chips for sound targets, different things jumping. I have different animation jumping across the screen. There's so much more that Boom does versus at the start of the pandemic. It was a learning curve for everybody, but now it can do so much more. It's amazing.
Yeah, I agree. I use Boom cards with my students today as well, and I noticed that they really are attracted to decks that have specific, I guess, tasks or skills in the first 5, and then you sort of move into moving things around on the screen where you have more of like a digital manipulative, so as the strategy even in the deck sort of begins to change, I tend to see that my students want to go back and play those more. So that it just keeps them engaged because it's novel. They click to the next deck or the next card and they're like, oh, what do I do here? And that's a lot of prefix root word work where they're switching those around. So those are always really fun. So same question, Amanda. When designing your Boom cards, what features do you use to make them more engaging? Do you have any tips for us?
Yes, and Ivy and Stephanie, thank you so much for your responses, because you covered so many important aspects of Boom Learning that just makes it such an interactive resource that helps students. And I definitely agree with everything that you've just said. One of the things that I love about Boom cards is I love the feedback that it gives. I love that it tells students when they're correct and it gives them that great job, just like my Apple Watch does for me every day. It's always encouraging me to close my rings and it's like, you did great yesterday, and you can still do it if I haven't met my goal for the day. That's what Boom Learning does for us. And I'll tell you what, every day at the end of the day, when I close my rings on my Apple Watch, I'm like, oh yeah. So Boom Cards does that for our students, is it builds up their confidence and it lets them know they're doing great. And then if students get something wrong, is it'll say, whoops, which is such a nice way to say it, because it's not saying, I can't believe you didn't get it correctly. It's non-judgmental. It just lets them know that they need to choose again. And then it takes that particular answer away. So if students started out answering a task card with 3 questions, once they get one incorrect, then they're only going to have 2 options left. And that's going to reduce the frustration, and that's going to help them know, oh, okay, I can do it. There's less options to answer. I can do this. And it gives them that reinforcement. So I love that. And I definitely echo what you say. The more movement, the more sound we can have, the more also real world experiences and examples. That's one of the things that I really like to put into the work, is a lot of real world examples, so that students can understand, oh yeah, I've been there, just like I was talking about with the lemonade and the condensation, and anything that can help students be able to relate it to their real world is going to help students be able to stay engaged. And then again, anything that requires movement, just moving that mouse, hearing those sounds, that's going to help our students be able to stay engaged as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And maybe one last question here. We've got, where do you get your ideas for making moments for engagement? So are you getting them, I guess this question is are you getting them from publications, people you follow, other inspirations? Are you getting them? A lot of times I understand, just as a teacher, getting your inspiration from the kids, right? Even when they're like, this is boring, when you're doing something else, you're like, you go home at night, you think, oh, what can I do to change, however I'm presenting my curriculum. So a lot of times the kids inform us, but I'm just wondering if either of you have, just places that you really get your inspiration or ideas for coming up with that. Like Ivy, when you were talking about rewards and all these really neat things that you do you remember where you were inspired to do that? Where remember how you came up with that? Or could it have been a student that said, what's in it for me,
Well, after looking at so many different learning strategies all the years that I've been doing this, I can tell you what excites kids at this point, and you really need to see what's going to excite kids. I get bored very easily, so I'm kind of the same way. What's going to excite me? I need things to be moving. I need things to grab my attention. And what's going to grab a kid's attention? Rewards, sound, movement. That's all going to grab their attention, and that's what you have to put into all the decks that you're making. I know that teachers, speech therapists need a lot of trials. If they're doing articulation, they need a lot of trials, keep going, drill. So I try to put some of that into my decks, but also kids need, you gotta put what kids need and what the teacher needs, or the therapist needs. And those are the things that I think about. Is it gonna be something that the kid's going to be interested in, the student's going to be interested in, but is it also going to be something that is going to get the end result of what the teacher is looking for? So you have to look at both of those and put those in play for decks.
Awesome answer. I really appreciate that. It's always important to do what's working for both, right? If it only works for one, it's not sustainable. So Amanda, you want to answer that quickly, and then we'll begin to wrap up and find, more open questions.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. So with our students, I see their reactions, just like Ivy was talking about. And one of the things through the years that I've noticed is it's easier for my students to understand a concept when there's visuals. So especially our English language learners is just being able to see that visual. So, I like to create boom cards that have visuals in them. I don't just want, back in the day, when I went to school, there was just a bunch of math problems and no visuals. And when I'm doing a math problem and I can see it, and I can see that it's not just a problem, but I can actually see things to move around, then that's going to help me be able to understand it inside and out and understand the concept of it as a whole, not just solve a problem. So visuals are really something that helps quite a bit. And I had mentioned English language learners, and one of the supports that I like to provide them with is a picture vocabulary chart. By giving students that as a reference, it helps students be able to do whatever boom card deck that you have for them to do, and they just have that extra support because the vocabulary may be a more difficult area for those students.
Super, thank you so much for that. I think maybe one of our last questions can be for some of our attendees out there, what are signs that varied instructional strategies are very important? What are the signs that we get as teachers that tell us, I've got to change something up? Maybe when they're not overt, like students saying, this is boring, why can't we do something else? Which, we hear as teachers a lot, but either positive signs where you see the benefit or where you're seeing something just not working. What are usually those indicators that get you moving on switching the instruction up again? Can you speak to any of those?
You want to go first, Amanda?
Sure, I'd love to. So one of the things is when I was working with second graders is I would have, we usually teach where it's I do, and then we do, and then you do. And so there were different things that I had in play for each of the different areas. When it's, one of those things that I do, I'm at the front of the board, but I'm also encouraging them to come interact at the front of the board. When it's small group, I'm, working with students in small group, and then I'm also encouraging them to write on their whiteboard. But then when it's we do, is I like having students, and I did this also, this works really well, believe it or not, for middle school students. I did this in 6th grade and it was great, is to have them work with shoulder partners. So shoulder partners is just the person that is literally in the desk beside them. And it can be one of those things where they work on things together, and it kind of builds that confidence of, okay, I'm starting to understand this concept, and it also helps students for a lot of times in the beginning when students are grappling with a concept is not only do they not have the confidence, but there may be some questions that they really want the answers to that they're not going to raise their hand and ask the teacher, but they're more likely to ask their peer. So that we do, when they're working with each other side by side, really helps them be able to ask questions in just a little bit more of a discreet way. And then the last thing is the I do. And the I do, this worked really well with my 2nd and 3rd graders, is I let them pick their own spots. And so we did where students got to work, they could take a clipboard and they can work under their desk. They can work in a beanbag chair. They can work on the rug. They can work at their desk. I had some students that their favorite spot to work was at their desk. And so just like Ivy was talking about some students where they're looking out the window or having a different perspective, sometimes just that quick little movement will help students be able to focus and they're more comfortable. So it's kind of like that idea of some coffee shops where they have those comfy couches and those chairs that you can just sink into, and you can just sip your cup of coffee and have a nice, slow conversation with your friend and stay engaged. But if those chairs are hard and they're uncomfortable and you don't like sitting on them, well, you're going to be more likely to want to leave quicker. So the same thing is true for our students. If they can sit in a spot that's more comfortable for them, then that seems to work well. Now, at the beginning of the year, I like to lay out the ground rules. Here are the expectations. Here are the policies that we have in place for when you do independent seating. And having those ideas in place really helps with classroom management. Another thing that I like to do that helps significantly with classroom management and also helps my students feel more secure is just pacing the classroom. So it's just what it sounds like. When students are doing their independent work, instead of me sitting behind my desk and grading papers, which, I like to walk around the classroom. And if you've got a lot of papers to grade, maybe you bring that stack of papers with you. And, you know, I like to walk around and check on each student. And I like to hear from each student how they're doing with that particular set of boom cards that they've got, and if they have any questions. So that helps quite a bit.
Super, thank you so much. So we have about 5 minutes left. We do have a question that I'm wondering, Ivy, would you be willing to answer this question? It's coming from an SLP. It is from Chris Mildroth. And Chris asks, I'm new to Boom and I'm interested in using Boom for high school students to promote engagement variety within speech therapy sessions. Any suggestions, comments, insights relating to Boom use with high school students would be helpful.
So I think there's so much out there right now if you're not looking to create for high school level for speech. I know that mine can, it depends on if you're what type of a population you're working with. If you have multiply disabled, learning disabled, or I'm not really sure what your population is, but there are so many great therapists out there for that level that are creating. And if you take a look at some of their free decks, that would be the way I would start. I don't know what exactly you're working on. If you could put that in the chat, that would be, or in the question and answer, that would be great. They will be engaged because you can use it as a pre and post test. You can give it to them at the start of the class before you even, or the session before you even go into the session, just to assess what they know. You can, the thing about this is for data collection, you can do pre and post tests with these boom cards just to see where they're at and where you need to go. So it's fantastic for all levels, especially high school. I use it for 8th grade at this point. I'm 5, 6, 7, 8, occasionally high school, not too often, but take a look at some of the free decks and you'll see what's out there.
Thank you so much, Ivy. Thank you, both of you, Amanda and Ivy. We just appreciate you being with us. I want to thank all the attendees for being here. Thanks so much for taking your time out and joining us and giving us your insights. We really appreciate that. I wanted to give you all a friendly reminder just to please fill out our webinar feedback form. You can find that link to it in the chat right now. And
it's our pleasure, my pleasure.
So much. We love to have you. It's really enlightening to hear all that you're doing, and thank you for working with students in our country right now, because I know it's not easy with this disengagement. So you guys are awesome. And we just want you to join us for our next webinar as well, if you can. It's on supporting students' social emotional learning. And you should find Amanda and Ivy's store links in the chat box as well. And again, I just want to say thanks and happy booming.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.